Today, we'll be making my favorite variation of the mashed potato. It has cream cheese, which gives it a subtle tang, and it's baked in the oven, which gives it a brown crusty top that looks and tastes amazing. Because it's baked in the same vessel that we're going to be serving it in, it's going to stay hot for a long time. And best of all, this can be made a day ahead, which makes it perfect for any feast or celebration when it can be difficult to have enough time for all of the different dishes we're making.
For potatoes, you have two choices. My preference is always going to be for the Yukon Gold for its flavor and creamier texture, but if you prefer a fluffier mash, then the russet will be the better choice. You can also do a mix of the two potatoes to get something in between, or just make use of whatever you have on hand. For this recipe, you'll need 5 pounds of potatoes. A good way to figure out how many potatoes you'll need without a scale is just to place them in a baking dish. A 13x9 baking dish will comfortably fit 5 pounds of potatoes. There will be some space in between the potatoes, but remember, there'll be other ingredients. One benefit of the russet is that they are typically larger, making them easier to peel. If you decide on using Yukon Golds, they tend to be smaller, so make sure to pick the largest ones you can, as it will make peeling them easier and safer. Once the potatoes are peeled, next is to cut them into equal-sized pieces. I cut Yukon Gold potatoes into 2 to 3 pieces depending on the size, or sometimes not at all for the small ones. As for the large russet potatoes, I typically cut them into 4 pieces. This gets me potatoes that are close enough to the same size and will be finished cooking around the same time. Place the cut potatoes into a pot of cold water. Cover the potatoes with an inch of water and turn the heat on to high. The fastest way to bring the pot to a boil is to use the lid. After around 10 to 15 minutes with the lid, my potatoes were at a full boil. But before doing this, make sure the water level is not close to the top of the pot, because the lid can cause it to overboil if left unattended. Once at a boil, reduce the heat to medium. The potatoes need to be cooked until they are very soft, which will take around 15 to 20 minutes since it started to boil. When the potatoes are cooked, they should be easily pierced with a knife. If they are falling apart when you poke them, they are definitely done. It's better to cook the potatoes a little too long than not long enough because they need to be mashable. Drain the cooked potatoes and let them sit in the strainer for 3 to 5 minutes. While waiting for the potatoes to drain, let's prepare the liquid ingredients. Into a bowl, add in an egg yolk, room temperature cream cheese, and a couple tablespoons of milk. Once the cream cheese is broken down and the mixture has a thick consistency, whisk in the remaining milk. I use cold milk, but it would help to use milk that has been warmed to room temperature. When the consistency of the mixture is uniform, stop whisking and set it aside. Now that the potatoes are well drained, add them to a 5-quart or larger bowl. While the potatoes are still hot, add in 2 sticks of sliced butter. For the seasoning, add in salt, freshly ground black pepper, a pinch of cayenne, paprika, which I think adds some nice color to the mash, and optionally a little bit of garlic powder. For the seasonings, start off light because you can always adjust later. For mashing, we're just going to use the standard potato masher. Once you're satisfied with your mashing and any signs of butter have disappeared, give it a taste test. Adjust seasoning, and more importantly, if you feel like you need more butter, then don't be afraid to add more. For mashed potatoes, butter is just like salt, so adjust it to taste. You are likely to use somewhere between 16 to 20 tablespoons of butter. I suggest adjusting the seasoning in small amounts because you don't want to overdo it in any one area, especially with the garlic powder, so use it cautiously. When you're satisfied with your seasoning, add in just a little bit more salt. But if you think you salted a little too heavily, then don't stress because I think you'll be just fine. Since our liquid mixture contains a raw egg, I cannot recommend you continue taste testing after adding it to the potatoes. But the reason I suggest adding a little more salt is because the cream cheese, milk, and egg yolk mixture will dilute the seasoning. Mix in the liquid mixture using the potato masher until the mashed potatoes have returned to a uniform consistency. Add the mashed potatoes into a 13x9 baking dish and use a silicone spatula to level it out smooth. Then using the tip of the spatula, poke the top of the mashed potatoes to create peaks. The peaks will later brown in the oven and help create a nice crust on top of the mashed potatoes. From here, you can cover it and store it in the fridge for the next day, or bake it now. When you're ready to bake, bake it at 425 using the convection setting for 20 minutes. If you're baking it straight from the fridge, you'll need to add an additional 5 to 7 minutes to your baking time. This is how my potatoes looked after 20 minutes. It just started to brown on the tip of the peaks and around the edge. From here, turn on the broiler for about 2 minutes or until you notice a part of it is starting to burn. After the broiler, the browning will become more pronounced and the top will have a nicer crust overall. For me, this is the perfect mashed potato. Using some sort of combination of Yukon Golds and russets really does make the best looking and more importantly, best tasting mash. The Yukon Golds help make a richer and creamier mash, while the russets help make the mash fluffier and brown a little better in the oven. Typically, mashed potatoes only have a smooth and creamy texture. These mashed potatoes have that too, but they also have a thin and crisp top, which not only looks amazing, but it also provides the textural and flavor contrast that mashed potatoes need so that every single bite is not the exact same. The mild tanginess from the cream cheese is another welcome addition that will make your mashed potatoes taste different from all the rest. And by baking it in the same dish we are serving it in, these mashed potatoes will stay hot for a while, at least 20 minutes. This will give us plenty of time to cook and plate the other things that we're going to be serving alongside it. If you ever had cold mashed potatoes, you know just how disappointing they can be. And with this recipe, cold mashed potatoes will be a thing of the past. Whether it's for a barbecue or a holiday feast, this is what I do every time I want to have mashed potatoes at the table.